morning.
Good morning.
I am Mark Wingate, the Deputy District Engineer for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, New Orleans District, and it is my privilege to serve as your MC today for the Mississippi River Deepening Partnering Ceremony. It is certainly my honor to welcome the Honorable John Bell Edwards, Governor of the State of Louisiana, Major General Diana Holland, Commanding General of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, Mississippi Valley Division, Ms. Renee Lapeyrolerie, Multimodal Commissioner of the State of Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, and Colonel Stephen F. Murphy, Commander of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, New Orleans District. I certainly want to welcome many of our partners, stakeholders, and guests who are watching live on Facebook today for this important announcement. Thank you for joining us. We have asked each of you to join us physically and virtually this morning to mark an important step which continues the investment in navigation along the lower Mississippi River. Today, the Corps and the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development have the necessary agreements in place to initiate the next phase of the Mississippi River Ship Channel project to deepen the Mississippi River deep draft channel between Baton Rouge and the Gulf of Mexico from 45 to 50 feet. Without further hesitation, at this time I have the privilege and honor of introducing the Honorable John Bell Edwards, Governor of the State of Louisiana.
Thank you, Mark, and it's great to be down in New Orleans with all of you today. I want to thank General Holland for coming down and for your work. Colonel Murphy, thank you very much for supporting the state of Louisiana, being a tremendous partner for us as well. And Commissioner Lapeyrolerie, thank you very much for your work on behalf of the state of Louisiana. You know, it feels like the COVID-19 crisis has put everything on hold. Just about every aspect of our personal lives, whether you're in business or you're an employee or, you know, obviously in government as well. And that is true in many ways. But the fact of the matter is we continue working every day to move our state forward, to strengthen our state, to promote our recovery. And nothing symbolizes that better or evidences that stronger than this project that we're talking about today. The Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, on behalf of Louisiana, entered into a financial cost share agreement with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to study the feasibility of deepening the Mississippi River to 50 feet from the Gulf to Baton Rouge. Today, that study gets put into action. And action is always better than study, although those studies are critically important. But the fact of the matter is we wouldn't be here today talking about this were it not for the tremendous work of Lieutenant General Todd Simonite and his very capable team. And that includes Major General Diana Holland with the Mississippi Valley Division and Colonel Stephen Murphy with the New Orleans District. I'd also like to acknowledge the work of the State Department of Transportation and Development under the capable leadership of Dr. Sean Wilson, who is the Secretary, and he is absent today, but representing DOTD is the Multimodal Commissioner, Renee Lapeyrolerie, and I want to thank her and her staff. And I'm going to come back up in just a moment and conclude my remarks, but to give you more of the details of this project from the state's perspective, I'm going to ask Commissioner Lapeyrolerie to come up and speak for a few minutes, and then I'll come back up when she concludes her remarks.
Thank you, Governor. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers determined a 7.2 to 1 benefit to cost ratio, which does not include an anticipated $40 billion in new facility investments. A $125 million return to state and federal governments, flood mitigation, or beneficial dredge material to protect the coast and entryway to the river. The Corps feasibility study resulted in a director's report authorizing the deepening of the Mississippi River from the Gulf of Mexico through the port of Baton Rouge. The report was signed on August 3rd, 2018 by the Director of Civil Works from the Army Corps of Engineers. Knowing this and understanding the value of a deepened river, The Edwards administration, under Secretary Wilson's leadership, began planning to fund our portion of this very important project. Simultaneously, the Office of Multimodal Commerce in DOTD began working with the congressional delegation and key Senate staff to have language inserted into the 2016 Water Resources Development Act, reducing the cost share for non-federal sponsors of deepening projects greater than 45 feet and up to 50 feet. With the support of our congressional delegation, this language changed the cost share for the state as the non-federal sponsor from 50% to 25%. Since the signing of the director's report, the state of Louisiana and DOTD, the Louisiana congressional delegation, and numerous stakeholders in Louisiana and along the entire length of the Mississippi River have advocated for the full funding of the Mississippi River Deepening Project. While 100% federal funding has not yet been achieved, the advocacy has led to the New Orleans District receiving the federal sponsor's cost share of 75% for the project. According to recent research by the Soy Transportation Coalition, the 256-mile stretch of the Mississippi River from Baton Rouge to the Gulf accounts for 60% of U.S. soybean exports, along with 59% of corn exports, by far the leading export region for both commodities. 1 foot of additional draft will accommodate approximately $1 million in additional cargo, enabling shippers post-deepening to use the Mississippi River and its inland tributaries versus the more expensive land bridges to the coast ports. One study estimates markets using the Mississippi River shipping channel will move 300 miles to the west. Markets will move 300 miles to the west and 150 miles to the east, using the less expensive water transportation and connectivity to the larger ships. The total estimated cost of the deepening project is $237 million, and as the non-federal sponsor, the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development has an estimated cost share of $81 million. For those not familiar with the budgeting process, if Secretary Wilson were here, he would tell you that this would not have been possible if this governor had not been firm on infrastructure funding. Without any hesitancy, his directive to include funding projects such as the Commemorating River Diversion and the Mississippi River Deepening Project would not be a reality were it not for his leadership. So thank you, Governor Edwards, for your leadership in multimodal infrastructure. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that yesterday the United States House of Representatives passed the 2020 WRDA Act so that the Corps can continue its great work with partnership with local and state governments. So thank you all.
And by the way, that WRDA Act does contain some provisions that are very helpful to the state of Louisiana with respect to our payment of our responsibility related to hurricane risk reduction system as well. And we're looking forward to that becoming law. Thank you very much, Commissioner Lapeyrolerie. So for those who are unfamiliar with global trade routes, the expansion of the Panama Canal created a new race to remain competitive due to the size of ships and the changing patterns of consumption of goods. It became imperative to improve the access for larger vessels to the lower Mississippi River deep water port system. The Mississippi River Deepening Project will enable and expand global markets for Louisiana farmers and manufacturers and citizens who depend on the import and export of goods for jobs and quality of life. Further, a deepened Mississippi River will be an economic superhighway for the state of Louisiana and for the United States of America. The river and its tributaries account for over $750 billion of the nation's economy and more than 2.4 million jobs. Here in Louisiana, 1 in every 5 jobs is directly or indirectly tied to our ports. And they make up almost 23% of the dollar amount of the state's goods and services. Consistent with my administration's commitment to delivering infrastructure and taking full advantage of federal resources that we send to Washington, D.C., I'm excited to have made the financial commitments to facilitate this very important project. In addition to the congressional delegation that's worked hand in hand with us throughout this process, I especially want to thank and applaud the Louisiana legislature for supporting the funding that we proposed for the non-federal cost share during this past legislative session. In 2018, I wrote a letter to every governor whose state touches the Mississippi River and encouraged them to do their part to advocate for this project. Their economic success derived from river activity is inextricably linked to Louisiana's ability to get and maintain 50 feet. The United States Soybean Board announced in July of last year a $2 million allocation to help offset the planning, design, and research costs of deepening the lower Mississippi River from 45 feet to 50 feet. Renee explained to you why this happened. 60% of the grain exported from the United States of America flows down the Mississippi River. With a deepened river, that will actually increase to 70%. And it's also why we have, by tonnage, the largest port in the United States of America, the Port of South Louisiana. They actually funded this from the soybean checkoff funds, which can only be used to enhance the value and preference for U.S. soybeans. For a transformative project like this, we absolutely have to get started if we ever hope to finish it. And today is the beginning of that process. The river that is flowing behind me will be much more competitive in tomorrow's economy than it is in today's economy. And this is incredibly important as we play to our strengths in Louisiana and take advantage of all of the gifts that God gave us. You know, second only to the people of Louisiana, our most precious and most valuable natural resource, probably is the Mississippi River. And it is in our interest in Louisiana to make sure that if anything in the central part of the United States of America, if they want to receive goods in commerce or if they want to export, that they have an incentive to use that river. That's how we're going to grow our ports. That's how we're going to grow jobs. We're going to continue to diversify our economy, and we're going to be more successful. So deepening of this river is part of that strategic advantage that we have, and it's part of our strategic plan to further enhance that advantage. We are already a world leader with our inland and deep water ports, and I want to see Louisiana be absolute number one in terms of bulk break, and containers. You know, when I became governor, the first thing I did, despite the $2 billion budget deficit that I inherited, is we doubled our investment annually in the Port Priority Program. But there's so much more to be done to ensure that we're spending those limited dollars on the best and highest use in the port community. And the ability to work hand in hand in close partnership with the Corps is making this possible. And I'm asking the entire port community in Louisiana to work with Secretary Wilson, with Commissioner Lapeyrolerie, to put their heads together and continue to develop more strategic plans for the state of Louisiana, where we can leverage resources, build on our natural assets and strengths, and develop a plan and implement it to make this river the busiest and most productive that it has ever been. By signing this agreement today between the state of Louisiana and the Corps of Engineers, we signify the launching of a project which will put international markets on notice while securing Louisiana's system of ports and waterways as the gateway to the heartland of America. So this is a big deal. I thank all the members of the press for being here today. And again, I want to thank General Holland and Colonel Murphy for their partnership. So thank you all very much, and God bless.
Thank you, Governor Edwards, and thank you, Commissioner Lapeyrolerie. At this time, I would like to introduce someone who may be the newest member of the Mississippi Valley Division and New Orleans District Team, Major General Diana Holland, Commanding General of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Mississippi Valley Division.
So as Mark mentioned, I'm Major General Diana Holland, and I command the Mississippi Valley Division of the Corps of Engineers. And today I'm representing Lieutenant General Todd Semonite, our Chief of Engineers. It is an honor to join you today in New Orleans and to recognize and celebrate a major milestone, the signing of the Project Partnership Agreement between the Army Corps of Engineers and the state of Louisiana. As the Governor's already mentioned, under normal conditions, a PPA signing
would be a huge event and attended by many partners, contributors, beneficiaries, and core employees. But like most events across America these days, in the interest of safety, we're relying on virtual capabilities to showcase this important event. So I'd like to start by thanking a few people. First, of course, is Governor Edwards, who has been a true advocate for this project. It is great to see you again, sir. Thanks to the Louisiana Department of Transportation, led by Secretary Wilson, and represented on site today, Commissioner Lapeyrolerie. The Department of Transportation serves as our principal partner and the state sponsor for this deepening project. Next, thank you to the champions such as the Soy Transportation Coalition and Mike Steenhook, and the Big River Coalition, specifically longtime partner and friend Sean Duffy, for their support to help us get here today. And finally, I want to give a huge shout out to the core team, Colonel Steve Murphy, Mark Wingate, and the entire New Orleans district, which has worked tirelessly over many, many years to maintain the channels of this portion of the Mississippi River, making the navigation mission possible, oftentimes through tough conditions, and most recently within a COVID environment. Your work here matters, and we thank you. The governor has already highlighted many of the benefits of this deepening project, as he called it, an economic superhighway, transporting greater amounts of cargo into the state's critical ports, bringing growth and prosperity to Louisiana. I represent a larger team that oversees work along the entire Mississippi River and the major tributaries which flow into it. And I can attest to the fact that this improvement is vitally important to the entire region and ultimately the nation. This part of the river connects America's heartland to the global economy. As mentioned, more than 60% of our nation's agricultural production is transported along the Mississippi River, responsible for creating hundreds of billions of dollars in GDP and supporting millions of jobs. By deepening the channel from 45 to 50 feet, ships will be able to carry significantly more cargo. 5 feet doesn't sound like much. Frame of reference, I'm about 5 feet tall. Well, I'll give myself an inch, actually 5'1". But translated into capacity of this strategic channel, an additional 5 feet can make the difference of more than $125 million annually in net benefits. This is truly a worthy investment, and the Corps of Engineers is proud to be a part of it. Again, thank you for being here or for watching. Thank you, Governor Edwards, the state of Louisiana, and many, many partners who have made this day possible. And congratulations on leading the way in bolstering America's economic security and ensuring our competitive edge. It is an honor to serve with you. Thank you.
Thank you, General.
Thank you, General Holland. At this time, I would like to introduce our final speaker today, the Commander of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, New Orleans District, Colonel Stephen F. Murphy.
So good morning. It's an honor on behalf of my team to welcome you here to the New Orleans District. It truly is a privilege to not only have you here, Governor, but Ms. Lapeyrolerie, General Holland, thank you so much for traveling, especially in this COVID environment. We truly appreciate it. But in this COVID environment, we really haven't been able to have the folks who have contributed a significant amount over the last really decades on this project. So for those of you who are online, on Facebook Live, really want to send you a special thanks for your participation. We wish you could be here. I want to extend a special thanks to Governor Edwards. He has been a phenomenal partner to the Corps of Engineers. I've been in command a year, and I have truly experienced a shoulder-to-shoulder experience with his administration on a number of projects and issues. And Governor, it's an honor truly because this is the first time that any governor of Louisiana has ever visited the New Orleans District. So welcome, we're glad you're here. So all great projects begin with great partnerships. And we've truly enjoyed the partnerships we've enjoyed today. And I will follow suit with the previous speakers and just say a few brief thanks. I won't belabor the point. Our non-federal sponsor is the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development. Dr. Wilson has been an outstanding partner. He's actually our partner on numerous projects here in Louisiana for the New Orleans District Corps of Engineers. But for him and his team, a lot of effort has gone over the years, but especially in the last 6 months to get us where we are today. I just want to say a special thanks because there's been a lot of diligent effort. And Ms. Lapeyrolerie, it's an honor to meet you, and thank you for your efforts as well. I also want to say thank you to the stakeholders. So General Holland made special mention of the Big River Coalition and Sean Duffy. And I won't belabor her point, but I will say I've met no bigger advocate for the Mississippi River in this project than Sean Duffy and the Big River Coalition. I don't think I've been to a conference in the last year here in Louisiana, or even in Washington, D.C. that had to do with navigation or the Mississippi River, where I didn't run into Sean and his team. So Sean, thank you to you and your team. And the same can be said of the Soy Transportation Commission, with Mike Steenhoek and his team, and the United Soybean Board, whose commitment to seeing this project succeed was demonstrated, just like the governor alluded to, with their allocation of $2 million in funding towards the deepening. I could spend all morning thanking a lot of the partners that have really joined with us in this partnership: river pilots, the ports, the Coast Guard, and so many others. So if you're watching this online from the Corps of Engineers, from the New Orleans District, we want to say a special thank you. Finally, I'd be remiss if I did not specifically thank the many members of Congress and their staff who, because they understood the strategic value of this project, not just to the state of Louisiana, but to the entire nation, advocated very recently for to receive the funding that allows us to be here today. No Corps of Engineers civil work project sees the light of day without authorization or appropriation, and their engagement and cooperation helped get us across the goal line. I think it's also worth mentioning that in addition to just helping get this project funded, that Congress provided us and the Corps an incredibly innovative tool that will help us execute this deepening project. This tool came in the form of a bill passed in December of 2019. It's called the Gulf Coast Regional Demonstration Program, the Gulf Coast Regional Demonstration Program. And what this does for the Corps is it allows us to address dredging and construction of the channel deepening project as a regional enterprise, not just a district effort. So many thanks to our congressional partners. So what does this project look like? There's a lot of history here. The deepening of the Mississippi River Channel certainly is not new. It was authorized almost 35 years ago. 2 of the 3 originally planned construction phases were completed within about 10 years of its authorization. That was first the deepening of the river from 40 to 45 feet from the Gulf of Mexico to Donaldson, and then shortly thereafter from Donaldson to Baton Rouge. And so where does that leave us? Today, actually 2 days ago, we signed the official project partnership agreement with Dr. Wilson with DOTD. And what that allows is us to transition into the 3rd phase of the deepening project, which you've already heard about, which is deepening the channel from 45 to 50 feet. And this all the way from the Gulf to the Baton Rouge. Since the river is naturally deep in most areas, many people don't know this, I didn't realize this. For example, the river behind me is over 100 feet deep. This is an incredibly deep river in many areas. The entire 256-mile stretch between the Gulf and Baton Rouge does not need to be deepened. The Corps, in partnership with the state of Louisiana, will actually only dredge about 75 non-contiguous miles of that 256. So the project's focus will be deepening the areas in the channel that are shallower and tend to shoal quickly, namely those areas south of New Orleans at the mouth of the river in Southwest Pass, and an area between New Orleans and Baton Rouge that we call the crossings. It consists of 12 locations where natural bends in the river cause the current to cross from bank to bank and result in heavier shoaling. So we've already spoken about the costs and the cost shares. So the general concept for the project is the Corps is going to let contracts and let them very soon, and we'll start down in Southwest Pass with the deepening there. While we do that, the state will work on relocations. The state's cost share for relocations is 50-50. It's 50% for DOTD and then 50% for the utility owners. And these are things like utility cables, pipelines, and other infrastructure that lay on the river's bottom where we'll be dredging. Upon completion of the deepening at Southwest Pass and in conjunction with the state with their relocation responsibilities, the Corps will then let contracts to deepen the channel to 50 feet between New Orleans and Baton Rouge at the crossings. So in closing, what does all this mean? What this means is the Corps has a complete package and we are ready to turn dirt in record time. We have the reevaluation study in hand from 2018. It validated the project's immense federal benefit. You heard the ratio, 7.2 to 1. If you think about the project costs that you heard, this project pays for itself in 2 years. We talked about the massive benefits, the increase in grain exports, but this project with a 7.2 to 1 benefit to cost ratio will pay for itself in 2 years. We have the environmental clearances that we need to proceed. Always a big hurdle for these large civil works projects. But we're even more excited about this because the Corps will use some of the sediment produced from the dredging to continue rebuilding Louisiana's vanishing coastline, increasing wetland habitat and increasing the sustainability along the coast. If you didn't know it, in the last 10 years, the Corps has built more than 14.5 square miles of new land on the Louisiana coast, more than any other agency. And this project will produce about 1,400 to 1,500 more acres using the sediment that we dredge from the river. We are very excited about this. Most importantly though, we have a study, we have environmental clearances, we have a plan for how the material we dredge will be beneficially used. We have money. We have FY20 work plan funding on hand, and we will execute the project's first deepening contracts in Southwest Pass before the end of the fiscal year. As we like to say in the military, this is an incredible flash to bang, especially for a civil works project. Again, I can't say enough that this flash to bang and how quickly we were able to get the approvals, get the funding, get everything we need to move forward. It truly has been a team effort, and unfortunately, a lot of the folks who are part of that team are watching this online. So many thanks to all of you. I can tell you that the Corps of Engineers, General Holland, myself, and my team all look forward to the same close partnership and cooperation that have gotten us here over the last 35 years and certainly in the last 2. And I look forward to celebrating when we complete the dredging here in another few years. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you again for the folks online. Building strong. God bless America.
Thank you, Colonel Murphy. So at this time, we will go ahead and commemorate this important milestone. We will now sign the dedication to partnership between the state and federal governments. Signing on behalf of the state of Louisiana will be Governor Edwards. Signing on behalf of the Corps is Major General Holland and Colonel Murphy. This partnership has been and will continue to be essential in delivering a project that will allow the Mississippi River in South Louisiana to remain competitive with the world's ports and integral to the nation's connection to the global economy. Following this signing, our speakers have agreed to remain behind to provide interviews and to answer any questions you may have. Again, thank you all for joining us here today, as well as watching on our live stream. Thank you.
questions from the podium? We'll have-
Absolutely. If I can get everybody, well, I think probably the easiest way is, sir, if I can get you just to return to the podium, and we'll kind of hold it as a press conference style Q&A. I think maybe that would be the easiest.
While y'all are setting up, I do want to thank y'all for your patience, members of the press, for complying with all the social distancing requirements and masks and so forth. It's incredibly important, and so I do want to thank you all for doing that. Now, I realize it's a little warm, but being outside is always safer than doing an event inside, and so we appreciate y'all being here and covering this event. And I do want to say again how much I appreciate General Holland and Colonel Murphy for their work on this. And with that, I can take a few questions if you all have them. Yes, sir.
How would you characterize the impact this project's going to have?
Look, it's going to be huge. This literally has been decades in the making. I can remember one of the very first conversations that I had after becoming governor was with then Vice President Biden came to the Port of New Orleans. And I talked to him about the importance of deepening the river. And then in the Trump administration, we continued to work this, and through the congressional delegation, and through the National Governors Association, reaching out to every governor whose state touches the river, because all of us benefit. And a lot of people thought that this was a Louisiana problem, and that if it was going to happen, that we should be the ones paying for it and so forth. But I will tell you, to get the cost share down to 25%, to get the federal government to step up, and the timeline that Colonel Murphy just mentioned to you is extremely fast by the standards of these type of projects. And this really is a huge part of our overall plan to make sure that we take full advantage of all the strategic benefits that we have in Louisiana, and none are more important than this river, because we want all of the commerce for the central part of the United States of America to really use this river, whether they're importing or exporting. And when that happens, there's a tremendous benefit to Louisiana, because it's our ports that are going to be handling that commerce, and we're just going to continue to diversify our economy and do so in a field that is less subject to all the fluctuations in the economy that we currently have in Louisiana, that is so heavily dependent, as you know, on the price of hydrocarbons. So it's really important. And I know that General Holland made this point better than I ever could. A lot of people think, well, 5 feet, what's the big deal? Well, if you go from 60% of the nation's grains exports to 70%, that by itself is a huge deal for us. Any other questions? Hey?
Hi. Do you guys have a goal for when this project will be finished?
Yeah, I'll ask Colonel Murphy to talk about when it might finish. I'm excited to know it's going to start very quickly down towards the mouth of the river. It takes a little longer to get the dredging up between Baton Rouge and New Orleans because of the utility crossings and those sorts of things that have to be taken care of first. But as far as what the estimated timeline is for completion, Colonel Murphy?
It's 2024. So what we have, last 2 seasons, longest two flood fights in the lower Mississippi River's history the last 2 years. 292 days before, 175 this season. So we're constantly dredging. So that's our operations and maintenance. That's the federal responsibility. What the deepening does is, in addition to that, we're going deeper. So it's going to take until 2024 to really hit those non-contiguous 75 miles between the Gulf and Baton Rouge. 2024, I would say.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
You mentioned, one of the speakers mentioned that the environmental concerns for the public, there are any outstanding concerns that there's anything raised that isn't covered that you're personally concerned about this project?
No, so I will let the general and the colonel speak for themselves. I'm not concerned about the environmental impact being an adverse impact. I am delighted to know that we're going to make maximum use of the beneficial use of the dredge material because that's the key to rebuilding our coast. We need to get that dredge material connected back with our coast and done so in a way that's smart, that will last. That's what the Corps is focused on, and I think Colonel Murphy indicated that with the dredge that we can beneficially use, we think we're at least 1,500 acres, something like that. 1,500 acres. I mean, that's exciting. I know of no challenges to the environment posed by this. I do want to remind everybody that this mighty Mississippi River, which is a tremendous asset to us, last year was at flood stage at this time when we actually had a hurricane that came through. That was the first time in history that had ever happened. And so the management of this body of water is incredibly important for all sorts of reasons. That's why we're glad to have partners like the Corps of Engineers working so hard to make sure that we can manage this asset. Any other? Yes, sir.
Although today is good news for Louisiana, what is the message you have for people who are potentially dealing with the unemployment benefits expiring?
I'm sorry.
Unemployment benefits expiring.
Oh, well, obviously that's a very tough situation. So today is the last day for the federal benefits. Now the state benefits, which are about $247 a week, that will continue. We do have challenges there because the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund was $1.1 billion in February, the 17th strongest in the country. And we've been paying benefits in record amounts over a sustained period of time now, and that balance is dwindling down. And I'm asking Congress in this Phase 4 legislation, and by the way, all the governors are, for funding to shore up those unemployment insurance trust funds so that we don't then have to either increase taxes or borrow money from the federal government where we have to put a surcharge on our employers, because whether it's a tax or a surcharge, our employers would have to pay more on their payroll in order to restore the solvency. But today is the last day of the $600 a week pandemic unemployment benefit. I have every reason to believe Congress is going to extend at some level that benefit, but there's going to be a break because they weren't able to get it done on time. I'm looking at the calendar. In 2 weeks, there's a recess planned for the Senate. So I would hope that before they go on recess, so in about 2 weeks, that they will, at the latest, they will have a new act that the president can sign, and those benefits will be restored because we know that they continue to be very necessary. In the meantime, we're going to continue to pay our state benefits, and so it's not like people will go completely without, but we understand there's a big difference between our $247 benefit and that $600 benefit that has been paid up to now. We are all in a very challenging environment, whether you're a business owner, an employer, whether you're an employee. We're just all in a very difficult place right now, and that's why I think ultimately and relatively soon Congress will come together because nobody wants us to continue this interruption to continue for longer than is absolutely necessary. Yes, sir.
Sir, in terms of the numbers here in Louisiana, how do you think we're doing? How do you anticipate our current status changing your future plans for things?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's been a tremendous challenge here, and Louisiana is sort of alone in what I'm about to describe to you. In the March-April time period, we had that first surge in cases across the country, and Louisiana had the highest growth rate of cases anywhere for a period of time. Very, very challenging. We put in our stay-at-home order and so forth, but we were able to flatten the curve and get the cases reduced pretty quickly. And then several weeks later, there's a second surge in the country, and we're involved in that one too. But to the degree that we've been involved in both of them, there's no other state that has actually had that same experience. And that's borne out by the fact that we are now #1 in the country in per capita cases from this pandemic. So it's particularly challenging. However, over the last several days, we have started to see a plateauing of cases. Although it's at a high number, before cases can start coming down, they have to stop going up. We have seen that. Now, in about 45 minutes, I'm going to get today's numbers. And the positivity is coming down as well, but it's still close to 15%. And we really need it to be below 10%. And you want it to either be stable or dropping. You don't want it to be increasing, even in small numbers. So we have a lot of work to do, and it's because we have a high incidence of cases as defined by the CDC, being 100 or more cases per 100,000 in population over the preceding 14 days. We literally have that in every parish across the state. We also have positivity that exceeds 10% in every parish across the state. So by both definitions of being hot, Louisiana's hot or hot all over. But we know that through modeling and because of some work in other states, that it is absolutely possible to flatten the curve and get to a rate of transmission of less than 1, which means the disease is on the decline and on the way out, without having to go back to a stay at home. But it depends on whether everybody does their part, and wearing this mask is the most important thing that we can do. Staying home when you're sick, washing your hands, making sure that you stay 6 feet apart from people when they're not from your immediate household. If we will do those things, and by the way, closing the bars as well, you mentioned that. Dr. Burks has said those are absolutely essential. Those are best practices in states like Louisiana, which is why we've taken those actions. And those are hard decisions to make, because you know that on the one hand you are adversely impacting the livelihood of people across the state, but you're doing it in order to save lives for people all across the state. And it appears that we've been now in this with the mask mandate of the bar closures for a little more than 2.5 weeks. We're starting to see the case numbers come down, the positivity come down, and so I believe the two are related. But I want to caveat that by saying we've only had a few days, and so we can't say for sure that this is it's going to play out over the next several weeks as we need it to. But you got to start somewhere. It appears we've started, and so I want to thank the people of Louisiana because they flattened the curve once. We can do it again, but it is going to take all of us working together and doing those things that are essential, and they're not pleasant. But in the grand scheme of things, if you really think about it, wearing this mask is a small price to pay in order to keep the economy open and keep people safe and out of the hospital. And one of the things that have been very difficult to deal with is 2 days ago we reported 69 deaths. Yesterday was 42. Those are some of the highest numbers. But to put those in perspective, and it's very tragic, very sad, deaths are a lagging indicator. So you can start doing better in positivity in cases and hospitalizations, and your deaths continue to go up for some period of time. But as you see fewer people in the hospital, you will see fewer deaths down the road. And we have, for 3 days in a row now, and for the first time in many weeks, we've seen a decrease in the number of people in the hospital with COVID-19. Again, I believe that's because of the mask mandate and the other mitigation measures and restrictions we have in place. So please, everybody understand what we're doing is based on science. It's based on what the doctors and epidemiologists are telling us, and we really are implementing what are believed to be at least best practices in close coordination with the White House and people like Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci, and also with the CDC guidelines.
We have time.
That's a long answer to a short question.
Time for one more question.
Yep.
Then we wrap it up.
The president has been pushing to reopen schools. That's been lost as funding for schools. What's your response to that?
Well, we have a plan that's been worked out using the CDC guidelines and our Office of Public Health. Worked very closely with Bessie to fashion the guidelines that they issued on July the 15th, I think it was. Districts are now having to do at least, and those are minimum guidelines, at least those things as they reopen. And you see there's not a uniform approach across the state. Some districts are going to wait until after Labor Day to open. Some will open as early as next week, but completely virtual. Others will open a few days later in a hybrid of in-person instruction and virtual. And so these are all best practices. We think kids need to be back in school, but it has to be safe. And so it's easier said than done because reasonable people can disagree about when it's safe enough for that in-person instruction. But I don't pretend that kids learn as well from a virtual classroom. Online is certainly better than no education at all, and that may be what we have to do in some circumstances. But we do want kids back in the classroom to be educated, but also their social and emotional well-being. is promoted by in-person attendance. Their access to nutrition is much better when they're in school. And you also have many kids whose basic needs, whether they're mental illness needs or other things, that are met in the school. And so it's incredibly important. And not to mention that every school teacher, principal, nurse, they're all mandatory reporters if they suspect abuse and neglect. And so we've been months without our kids being in the classroom, and so we really want to get them back, but we do want it to be safe as well. And so that's why we're working so hard to get it right. And it's kind of like reopening the economy and promoting public safety. Reopening schools and promoting public safety is just about following the science, doing what is required. And I'll tell you, I'm very appreciative of the hard work that's been done all over the state of Louisiana by our superintendents and school boards and all our principals and teachers and so forth. You know, we're going to work, move forward and work the plan that we have. And we will be looking at the data every single day. And we may have to make a different decision later, but I can tell you, as of right now, we're expecting those schools to open, and school boards are still meeting, and some are delaying the in-person instruction and so forth. And if that's what they do, we fully support that. But I do think as early as next week, by the end of next week, we are going to see some students back in classrooms in Louisiana. Look, I want to thank you all for coming out and continuing to cover the COVID-19. I want to thank you for coming out and covering this announcement today, which is hugely important for our state. And it is an indicator that even though we're in the grips of this pandemic, we are still working these projects and trying to move our state forward and better position ourselves, not just for the next few years, but for generations. And that river behind me is a huge part of that. So thank all of you. Have a great weekend. Be safe out there. Wash your hands. Social distance. Stay home when you're sick. Wear your mask. And cut down on your activity. If you could cut down your activity by 50%, that's another way that we will